We're at the end of our series today in the book of Judges, and this is if this is the first time that you're hearing about this, then either let me say welcome to St John's Chatham, or let me say to all those of you who've been in St John's Kids or St John's Youth, you've missed a lot. And it's a hard task to hook in at the end of a book. So let me set the scene for you. Let's start at the beginning. God made the world. Adam and Eve rebelled by eating of fruit. God evicted them from the garden. Stuff happened. Noah, Babylon, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Rachel. No, Leah, no, but Rachel, and then Bilhah, and Zilpah together. Together, they had 12 sons, and they formed the tribes of Israel. After a while in Egypt, Moses led them out. They all messed up, and they were led by God in the wilderness. And then they took over the promised land under Joshua. Then leadership went into a succession of people, including Deborah, who were known as judges or rulers. They were military leaders more than rule makers and diplomats. And over the last few weeks, we've seen a bit of a cycle. The book of Judges shows this repeating pattern of the people sin, they forget God and they do evil. They suffer because God lets them be defeated by other nations and be oppressed by other nations. They cry out to God for help. God offers up a judge to save them, to rescue them, and then the land is at peace until something like the judge dies or something like that happens. And then that cycle starts all over again. It's a cycle that I think we can recognize for some of us in our own lives. We sin, we regret the consequences, we confess, we say sorry, but then we sin again. We sin, we confess, we sin, we confess. And actually, as humans and as Christians, we can break this cycle through accountability, through replacement activity, through the power of the Holy Spirit at work in us. Now, Samson does some amazing stuff. He rules or judges Israel for 20 years. Has a particular negativity to the Philistines. They were the enemy after all. And at one point he caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs with a flaming torch in their tails. And so they were released into the grain fields and just basically burnt up all the grain fields of the Philistines. Another time he took out 1,000 Philistine soldiers only using the jawbone of a donkey. Imagine that, friends. Now we're told that Samson was a Nazirite, which means, according to Numbers 6, someone whose hair had not been cut as a sign of their dedication to God. The other thing to say is that the name Samson is taken to mean little son or child of the sun, whereas Delilah has potential links to darkness, Layla, or delicate, weak, or languishing. So it's not clear to me what followed what. Did the meanings become attached after these events? As that is, do the incidents described here define the meaning of the names, or the other way around? Anyway, Mr. Light goes to visit Miss Delicate Darkness. Samson goes to visit Delilah, who, by the way, is probably most likely Jewish, since if she were a Philistine, they wouldn't need to bribe her. And secondly, Samson would not have trusted her. So money, bribery, sometimes talks louder than commitment to the cause of serving God. Then we have Samson, the ruler of the Israelites, going to hang out with Delilah. By the way, the valley of Sorek, where Delilah is described as living, was just kind of down the hill from Zorah, where Samson grew up. So maybe they were childhood sweethearts, who knows? Childhood acquaintances, at least. Anyway, she was offered a bribe, 1,100 shekels of silver, we're told, by each of 5 rulers of the Philistines. Now then, anybody, any clues? How heavy is a shekel? It's about 11 grams, 2 teaspoons of sugar, if you like. So she was offered 1,100 shekels of silver, which is about 13 kilograms of weight. Now, I'm wondering who's feeling strong today. Is anybody able to lift 13 kilograms amongst those that are now very engaged with colouring? Could you manage it, Miles? Can you manage half of that? Come and see if you can carry for me. Here's 5 kilos of sugar to start with. Could you manage that? Okay, you got that. I've just got more to come. Can that go? It's not so heavy, the next one. this is another kilo and another half a kilo. So that is half of what one of the rulers of the Philistines offered in weight of silver to Delilah. How are you getting on with that? You're going to drop that in a minute, aren't you? Let me take it from you. Thank you so much. Give Miles a clap. So she was offered 10 times this amount, which is the equivalent to, I don't know, your average adult, 65 kilograms in silver. Now let's go from weights to values. Apparently, according to the internet, 1 gram of silver currently retails at £1.40. So, 65 kilos is worth just under £100,000. That's the amount that they bribed Delilah. It's kind of a lot, but it's kind of not very much if you're going to betray the ruler of your country. But it's certainly not lunch money that we're talking about, is it? We're talking about a fair wad of cash. And seemingly the answer of, will you sell out your leader of your people for £100,000? For Delilah, the answer is, yeah, I will. And so she asks, and as we saw in the video, 3 different times, Samson tells her a story that turns out to be untrue. Perhaps he didn't trust her with that truth. Perhaps had number 6 been available to Delilah, she would have known, and perhaps they were kind of playing this game that she kind of knew what to do, but she kind of chose, because it was the Philistines, to see if they could kind of work a different way forward. Who knows? But then Delilah ends up nagging Samson day after day after day. Let's hear these words again. This is verse 15. Now she said to him, that Delilah said to Samson, how can you say, I love you, when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you made a fool of me, and you haven't told me the secret of your great strength. With such nagging, we're told, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. And then she got the information she wanted from him eventually. It all feels a bit one-sided to me. Samson loves Delilah, but there's no hint that Delilah loves Samson. There's no hint as to the status of the relationship, but I wonder if he was sick to death of her nagging on at him, then what was it that made Samson keep turning up? Anyway, we're told that after putting Samson to sleep on her laps, then she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and she began to subdue him, or he began to weaken, and his strength left him. In that next verse, it's clear that the source of strength is God, since we're told that Samson didn't know that the Lord had left him. Thus, his honesty meant the symbol of his dedication to God, his hair, had been shaved off. And so, as we heard, Samson was carted off to prison. He's got no hair at that point, got no strength, because the Lord has left him. But of course, just like you and me, when you get your hair cut, it grows again. And when you get it cut severely, it seems to me it grows faster. I don't know why that is, but anyway. And by the time he's brought to this banquet, he has regained sufficient spiritual sight to actually pray. And praying is not something we see Samson doing much of in the record that we have. So he had strength to pray, and then God enables him to act. And we're told that he was brought from prison to entertain them. Well, it was great entertainment in that he literally brought the house down. He might return, his might return so that he could push the foundation pillars out and bring down the whole temple roof onto the revelers. Now, as we were listening to that, I would notice that the description is that he put his left hand out on one pillar and his right hand out on the other pillar, which gives us a physical echo of Jesus dying on a cross for us. Now, Jesus died that we might have life, not so that the heathens, as in Samson's story, would die, but there is a sense of God bringing life from death. Hello. Now, it's a great story. We can reflect on it. We can lament the situation that the Philistines and God's people were at war with each other. We can recognize that some of Samson's actions are not of the perhaps standard expected of leaders in the church today. But what does all this mean for us? What can we draw from this for us? Well, I think in the temple scene, we see the power of prayer, don't we? Samson prayed for strength. God gave it to him. We could talk about relationships. Samson and Delilah are effectively, to my mind, an anti-example of good relationships. How not to go about a relationship. I mean, it's a one-sided declaration of love. Delilah is manipulative. It feels like she's only in it for the bribe money. But let's talk about that bribe money a minute. What we're told in Judges is that it was 1,100 shekels from each of the rulers. And there's no kind of clear statement that there were 5 rulers of the Philistines. You get that from other bits of the Bible. And it just feels like an odd amount, 1,100 shekels. It's not, would 1,000 shekels have been just as effective? But there are, as I read around this, some people, some scholars who point out that Judges covers 12 hero leaders, of which Samson is the last. But those leaders draw from across only 11 of the tribes. And the one tribe that isn't mentioned is the tribe of the Levites. So the priests, the ones that were supposed to teach God's ways and God's laws to the people, they are missing from Judges until you get to chapter 17, which is the chapter after the one we've had. And then they don't get mentioned in a good light at all. What happens is that we meet a Levite who's basically looking for a new place to live, and so he goes off and he is a priest at an idol shrine, effectively, which kind of says it all about the Levites. But they were called, the role of the Levites were to be God's representatives on earth. They were called to teach God's people his ways, and it seems that the Levites are clearly not functioning well. The one Levite we meet is not in Jerusalem. He's not in the kind of central headquarters. And basically, Levites were supposed to be given 10% of the crops of the people so that they could then focus on leading worship and on leading teaching. But actually, you could imagine that if they're not being given enough food, then they go back and do farming, and they do find other ways of fundraising, effectively. So in Judges, pausing to look at numbers, the numbers mentioned shows a bit of a fixation with 11 or multiples of 11. And I haven't really got time to go into that today, but there is very much a sort of, this is supposed to give dissonance. It's supposed to sit uneasily with us, because when there are 12 tribes of Israel and there were 12 apostles, this feels like a bit of a clash to then talk about 11. But it's that way of Judges pointing out that actually there's a lack of effectiveness from your priestly teacher grouping, the Levites. Now, chapter 16 is the last chapter about one of the particular Judges, and then we've got a few more chapters before the end of the book of Judges. So we're just going to kind of speedily cover that. And the repeated phrase in those last 4 chapters is, in those days Israel had no king. And it's 4 times it gets repeated. Start at chapter 18, 19, very end of the book, the very last verse. And in chapter 17 we see it, and in the 2 end point, the beginning and the end reference, it's in those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. Which perhaps gives you an echo of that sense of the lack of input from the priests, from the teachers, that everyone just decided for themselves what they thought was right. So we're going to take a few moments to watch a video from the Bible Project, which is a sort of explainer about the detail of what happens in Judges. Now, we're not going to start the first 5.5 minutes where it takes you through the first 16 chapters. You can go and watch that at home on your own. We've got the last 2 minutes, which is taking in those last four chapters of Judges. So let's watch that now if we can. Thank you.
The book of Judges. The final section shows Israel as a whole hitting bottom. There are 2 tragic stories here, and they are not for the faint of heart. They're structured by this key line that gets repeated 4 times at the close of the book. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. The first story is about an Israelite named Micah who builds a private temple to an idol, and that gets plundered by a private army sent from the tribe of Dan. So they come and they steal everything, and then they go and burn down the peaceful city of Laish and murder all of its inhabitants. It's a horrifying story. When Israel forgets its God, might makes right. The final story of the book is even worse. It's a shocking tale of sexual abuse and violence, which all leads to Israel's first civil war. It's very disturbing. And that's the point. These stories are meant to serve as a warning. Israel's descent into self-destruction is the result of turning away from the God who loves them and saved them out of slavery in Egypt. And now Israel needs to be delivered again from themselves. The only glimmer of hope in this story is found in this repeated line in the last part of the book. It actually forms the last sentence of the story. Israel has no king. And so the stage is set for the following books to tell the origins of King David's family, the book of Ruth, and also the origins of kingship itself in Israel, the book of 1 Samuel. But the story of Judges has value as a tragedy. It's a sobering explanation of the human condition, and ultimately it points out the need for God's grace to send a king who will rescue his people. And that's the book of Judges.
Okay, so that was from the Bible Project, so do go and look at that more if you want to. But let's come back to this sense of Israel had no king, everyone did as they saw fit. It's still true today that if you don't have King Jesus, then you do what works for you. With Jesus as your king, you don't do as you see fit, you're committed to doing as Jesus sees fit. That is to loving, to honoring your neighbor in the way that you want to be loved and respected, to loving God with your all. We summarize that locally here as loving Jesus, loving Chatham. So I have to ask, have you made Jesus as your king? Or are you still doing as you think fit? And if you've made Jesus your king, then are you living to the glory of the king? All creation will eventually say, all hail King Jesus. But will you choose to do that now? By your words and by your actions? So we're going to pray, we're going to sing, and as we sing, if you want to make it over there to the prayer team, then they would be delighted to pray with you. Because this is important, friends. Who you think of as in charge of your life is ultimately a question that will live with you for all eternity. So let's stand if you're willing and able to. We're going to pray, and then we're going to worship in song again, I think, unless I've got my timings messed up. So, Father God, thank you. Thank you that you offer to be our Father. Thank you that you offer to adopt us into your family. And that that's not based on who we have, what we have done, but who we are. We are made in your image. Thank you that you help us to change. And we ask that you would give us courage by your Spirit to bring change for the better in our lives. So, Father, give us grace to honor Jesus, our King, in all our relationships, in all our words, in all our thoughts and actions. Amen.